Okay, John, you can do the introduction. Go ahead and do the introduction. Stand right here. Do the introduction.
What? This is my grandma.
What's her name?
Grandma Casey. Wilma
What's
Casey.
What's her first name, Grandma?
Grandma Wilma Casey. This is Ben Stricker recording and doing the report on it.
What's today? Where are we at?
We're at Grandma's house.
In
This is the 20th. The 20th of
February,
1994.
and we're in Folsom, California.
Are we?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good. Okay. First subject I'm going to talk about is your childhood and parents.
I'll say what I can remember.
Start from the beginning.
I was the...
First of all, I guess for the record right here. Where you were born.
I was born in Prairie du Rocher, Illinois, December the 17th, 1919. And I was the fifth child of Olive and John Auer, A-U-E-R. I had three older brothers and a sister that was the oldest in the family, and I'm the youngest. And my dad was a carpenter, a lumberman, and he had built a four-room house, done most of the work himself, and that's where my brothers and sister were born. But then he decided that he wanted to buy interest. He had the man that owned the lumberyard was going to sell, and Dad thought it was an opportunity. And this was about 1919, and he had to sell his house that he had built
Keep talking.
to have enough money for a down payment. So he sold the house and bought a rental house up by the lumberyard. Well, it was a small house, and my mother wasn't very happy about that move because she liked her little house and her neighbors were. But that's the way it had to be. And so we lived, I was born then in the rental house up by the lumberyard that we had. And we lived there, I lived there for about 5 years. And then Dad bought a bigger house and land with it down at the other end of this little Prairie du Rocher down. And we left there. So, and that's what I remember my childhood from then on. I don't remember much about the first house. And there was a big yard, and Dad really could work and make things. There was no running water, but he put in a sink and put a pump in, and we didn't have a bathroom, but he built had a screened-in porch that went out the back door into, I guess it's a shed or where you could build a fire and put a bathtub in there. Although it just ran out into the yard in the back. So, and we had to pour the water, but it was a bathtub. So we had the modern things, that's why. And we lived there with my brothers and sisters. It was a fun place. There was lots of land and lots of people, kids around there. And then on the land that he had bought with the house, he built a new one. A new, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 5-bedroom house. 1 bath for all of us. And we moved there when I was 8. So I lived in this house, and it had running water and electricity and everything. So it was kind of modern. And I lived there until I was a sophomore in high school. And at that time, the others were all gone. My older brothers were married and left. And Dad had always wanted to own a hardware store. So he bought a hardware store in another town in Highland, Illinois. And I had to leave my friends in high school when I was a sophomore. In the middle of the year, go up to Highland and start in, and you walk into school and everybody looks at you for sure, the new gal on the block. And not at the beginning of the year. Well, anyway, it was hard. But I loved it after I got going. And I joined the drum corps there, and it was bigger than Prairie du Rocher. Not a big city, but it was. so that was a happy 2 years. But it didn't plan out as well as it had. The town of Highland was rather a German community, Swiss German, and they were rather close-knit and tight with their money. And Dad, you know, if he had the price on it, if you want to buy it, there it is. And he wanted to haggle. They wanted to come in and haggle over the price. Anyway, somehow he didn't stay there. So my older brother was working there, and he left Alvin in charge of the store and run the store. And he married a girl from Highland, and that's where they lived. And we went back to Prairie Rocher. Well, which was fine. They still had the lumberyard. And but when I got back there, I still had another year, senior year of high school to finish. And there wasn't any high school in Prairie Rocher, just the 2 years. So I went to a boarding school in Belleville, Illinois, run by the Notre Dame nuns. And I had to stay there all week. You couldn't run around, and you did, but it was fun. It's a good place. And we came home once a month. And so that's where I graduated from high school, was from Notre Dame Academy in Belleville, Illinois. Then, let's see, so that was in 1938. And then I came back to Prairie Rocher, the home, and I worked for my dad at the lumberyard as a bookkeeper. And in that time that I was there, we had Boots Brands was a representative to the Illinois state legislature, and he came to Dad and I, and he said he had enough power, or I don't know what you call it, but he could hire a secretary. He needed them at Springfield, Illinois, and would I care to? So I had to brush up on my shorthanded typing, and then I rode to Springfield with Boots and found a place to board and lived up there. It was just the one session. And then when he came home, I'd come home. So that was a truly exciting experience. Say what?
Working for the government, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then after I came back, I got a job at the bank, which was right across the street from where we lived in Prairie Rocher. Dad built this house. And I worked there for about a year and a half, and then I had a vacation coming too, and I wanted to go to Cape Girardeau to see Charlotte, my sister-in-law. My brother had married Charlotte, Charlotte and Vernon and I lived there. And Verna was in the service, and Charlotte was living by herself because she hadn't had children yet, and Verna was off in the service. And she said, "Why don't you come down and have your week's vacation with me?" And when I got down there, she said, "Well, why don't you get a job down here in Cape Girardeau and live with me?" Said, "I got this house by myself." Good idea. So I went down to the Missourian, which was a newspaper office there, where Vernon, my brother, used to work. And of course, everyone was needing workers then because the boys were all off services, and a lot of the girls were off doing defense work in the bigger cities.
After World War What?
World War II, about 40, maybe 40, I guess, 40. And so Mr. Keeney said, yes, when could I come to work? He needed someone in the stationery store to watch over that, and then on weekends, the salesmen that would come back from traveling, and they'd have some bookwork and some letters to get out, and I was to help them with that. So that was my job. So I went back to, from the vacation, went back and told Mr. Burjoyce, who was my boss at the bank, that I was going to be moving. Had to give him 2 weeks' notice, and came down to Cape Girardeau, lived with Charlotte, and didn't have a car, but she did then, and I walked to work and took a bus part of the time. But what happened after I started that business, which I thought was going to be fine, she wanted to leave to go see Vernon before he went overseas, to go out to California and wherever he was before he went overseas. So I didn't want to stay at her house by myself. So I rented a room from Babe Nader, who was staying with her mother because her husband was in the service. Her husband owned the Missourian down there, but she had to be back there with her mother and 2 kids, and I was too. So it was a family life that I knew. And I did work there, but then naturally paying a lot more rent and not having a car. And then Dad was back in Prairie du Rocher, couldn't get anyone to help with the books, so he was needing someone, and I wasn't setting the world on fire, making a lot of money in Cape. So I decided I'd do better to go home and help Dad. But in the meantime, I had a date with a young man named Frank Casey.
How do you meet him?
My next door neighbor to where Charlotte and I lived, he lived, Johnny England and his sister lived there. And Johnny said, I got someone we're going on a date. There's a big dance over at across the river, big time. And so that's where I met Frank Casey. And so we had a couple days dates, but then I was leaving. I already made plans to go back to Russia. But Frank kept coming every weekend. We'd drive.
Prairie du Rocher?
Uh-huh.
Is it what, an hour?
Which is about 80 miles, yeah. And so he would come every weekend. He even flew an airplane. Johnny England was a instructor out at Harris Field, teaching soldiers how to fly. So Frank and Johnny had an airplane, and they flew up one. We had an emergency landing field out at Prairie du Rocher. It was not but an emergency landing field is what it was. So they flew up and we went out.
Did you get the grandma to fly? Did he fly it, or?
No, Johnny. Well, Frank had taken some lessons. He hadn't flown alone yet. But they did, and Johnny's girlfriend came along too. On the way back, of course, when we were there, Dad had fixed a drink for both of them, something to nibble on and a drink. And when they were flying back to Cape from Prairie du Rocher, they had made between Johnny and that they wouldn't tell her, but Johnny would lay back and I could go on to sleep. And Frank was flying the plane. She almost died. That was a mean trick. But anyway, that was the eventful plane trip back there. And so I guess Frank kept coming every weekend, and we dated and going until about a year later we decided to get married. And we were married at St. Joseph's Church in Prairie du Rocher. And had all of, wasn't big wedding, had Frank's 3 brothers and wives.
Can we get that?
Yeah,
Can you stop?
Yeah.
Can we get that, or? Where's the stop?
Hello. What? No, I was in the living room, and my son, my fame is spread.